Becca, you're back from one, not a military deployment.
Not a military deployment. No, a me deployment. No, I'm just kidding. HDR teams, Humanist Disaster Recovery teams. We just had our first, technically test deployment. It would be a little bit different if a disaster had just happened and we were springing into action suddenly. But this was one that was more controlled to try to find out if we were prepared for that eventuality. And it went really well.
So, Becca Vitsmun, we really wanted to have you on in November and December in advance of this particular deployment, but there were some pesky internal organs that kind of exploded on you, didn't they?
Yeah, they sure did. Only one. And technically it's very small. It's very tiny. My appendix decided that it was just going to give out on me. It was actually a night that I had spent hanging out with Jeremy.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And I had actually come over to your home, Becky, and we were watching a movie, and I was very uncomfortable and kept shifting around. But I didn't think I was about to die or anything.
Had we been talking that night about all the many proofs of intelligent design, like brain freeze and the fact that God has put a random time delay grenade in everyone's stomach?
Yes. And mine went off. So I got home and I'm, thrashing around like you do. And I didn't know exactly what was going on, but I was holding a heating pad on my side. And then I was like, what if this? And I went through and read, what the symptoms were. And the last one, it was like, I have it. Oh, but I'm not throwing up yet. And I was really thrilled about that. But then I saw pretty bold letters that said, do not hold a heating pad on your appendix. It may cause it to burst. And I was like, oh, this is bad. And that right then is when I threw up. And I was like, ah!
So the miracle of WebMD has saved your internal organs at this point. But so back in December, you had that done. You couldn't be on the show to talk about it in advance. But you recovered and you were well enough to go on, what was it, right after New Year's, right?
Yes. I flew out actually on New Year's Day.
And where were you guys deploying to?
We went to Columbia, South Carolina, which was devastated by floods in 2015. I think that was October of 2015. And yeah, it was definitely, there's still a lot of need out there. And so we were really happy to be able to have our first deployment.
So through Foundation Beyond Belief, HDR teams, that's Humanist Disaster, and then what does the R stand for in this case?
Recovery, and it's very specifically recovery. There's different types. There's relief and there's response, and we go over this in our trainings, but recovery is a very specific time period after all of the life-saving measures have been completed. So this isn't like search and rescue, and there are, the types of things where people have been injured, those kinds of things have already been taken care of. This is once people are starting to try to put their lives back together after they've been destroyed.
So it kind of makes sense that even though this flood happened in October or in the fall, you would wait until January to start a deployment to help rebuild the things that were devastated.
Absolutely. And one of the things that we're trying to do with the program is put our time, energy, effort, and money into the places where they're needed the most, and where it's honestly needed the most right now is in the recovery period, where the people who have fallen through the cracks, there are people who don't have insurance or their insurance isn't enough to cover what's going on. They'll be in a specific type of earning bracket where they don't qualify for FEMA. They don't qualify to have their needs met by their own finances. And so these are people who would have no one else to turn to if there weren't for nonprofits and volunteers. And so specifically, it's at the point where these kinds of people have been identified and would not get any help any other way.
So how did you gather the folks that ended up going out there?
So we have a database, and you can always be a part of it. If you'd like to join our database, you can do that right now at foundationbeyondbelief.org/HDR teams. We have over 350 people currently in the database, but we also put out a little bit of an all call onto social media to gather other people who might be in the area. And once I had several people who were coming from outside of the area. I contacted local group leaders to try to get all of the locals involved as much as possible, because while we do have a deployment going on for a week, those who are within the local area can just come for a day or a half a day. We want to include as many locals as possible, and even encourage them to continue it through Beyond Belief Network and volunteering with their local organizations, with our partner organizations who are there on the ground.
So who was your team? Who was made up of your team? Are these people that are well-versed in how to do construction,
Absolutely not. I don't think there was anybody on the team who had ever done any... Oh, no, there was one. Thomas True, who does Gateway to Reason, and he's, called into the show before, and everything like that. He was on the team, and he knew what he was doing. He was the only one. But our partner organization trained you task by task, and they are very, very good at what they do. I honestly feel very confident in every single thing that I now know how to do. I can, rip up floorboards, and I can, pull out I can do, mold remediation work. There are people who were trained how to hang drywall. I wasn't trained in that, but there's, sanding and the mudding and taping corners, all these kinds of things. Honestly, the entire team walked away and they're like, now they're scrutinizing their own homes or other people's homes or hotels that they're staying in. They're like, wow, if they would have just put a little attention in here, this would be a perfect corner, But you really learn very quickly exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And then the partner organization, the people who work for them are through AmeriCorps, and they're just really, really good at what they do. They're very attentive. You can ask them 15 times the same question, and they're never going to make it seem as though you didn't get it last time, and then you walk away with a lot of new skills. It was very cool.
You're doing the work specifically with a humanist outlook and a humanist perspective. Who are the people that are the recipients of this volunteer work? Are they themselves religious? Are they non-religious? Are they humanists?
I'm not actually sure what their religious background is at all. I did meet the homeowners. We never actually talked about religion in any way. And strangely enough, no, I just realized I'm not supposed to talk about any of the specific details about the homeowners, so I can't go over what that fact was. But no.
But so that's an important thing, that you respect the privacy of the beneficiaries of your volunteer work then.
Yes.
So the team that's there, everyone is there coming from a humanistic perspective. Is there any talk about that, sort of debriefing after a day's work?
Absolutely. Every single day we have a meeting called Nightly Reflections where we talk about the day, and we discuss any problems that arose or things that we didn't realize that, we would run into, or we'd also talk about, things that went well. It was always a really good meeting. Every single person was very involved in shaping the program. And, I had my notebook I would feverishly write in as they would discuss ideas and different things that we could do. One night we actually, every now and then we did work beside faith-based organizations or volunteers, and with varying degrees of success. Because there was one time whenever we were working with just a church group, and they had singled out one of the youngest person on our team and put his hand on her and said, "It's okay to pray every once in a while." And we had a long discussion about what we should do in a circumstance like that, because her response, which we deemed as being perfect, was, thanks.
So you can imagine a young person sort of being approached by this. You're here to do volunteer work. You're encountering someone else that is motivated to do this work through their own religious faith tradition. You are not motivated to do this work through your religious faith tradition, and they're trying to essentially tell you it's okay to be one of us?
Yeah, well, it was a one-off comment that he said while walking past her in the hallway, and then he never spoke to her again. And so, it was just it just seemed like he was just trying to infiltrate quickly and make it on his way really quickly, like not interested in having a debate. And, we weren't interested in debating either. We did have a little discussion outside. Like they took me aside to say, hey, this happened, and bring it to my attention. Huh?
It would be pretty tragic if during the helping people it squared off into a debate.
Well, it wouldn't. That's completely against all of the trainings that we provide, in which we're not interested in doing that at all, and we kind of take the we're just humans helping humans standpoint on it, and not interested in debating anything whatsoever. But so we ended up taking her aside, and we were kind of joking. We're like, this is why we don't do that. This is why we don't say it's okay to just not pray. Instead of doing that, we take the high road whenever it comes to that kind of thing. Although we did have a wonderful experience with another church organization that had come out. They were going to each of the homes and bringing quilts, and they're called Quilt A Compassion. They had maybe 500 quilts. Now, this is a tremendous amount of work.
That's a huge amount of labor that goes into
absolutely.
Making and quilting a piece.
Yes. And so what they ended up saying was that they come out about 3 months after, because this is whenever you really can identify who has been hit the hardest, because they're still recovering. Like, they haven't gotten to a point where they've moved on in any way. And so they go to the volunteers who are still out there and they say thank you. And so anyway, they were talking to actually Foundation Beyond Belief's executive director, Noelle George, was there that day. And they were talking to her and they said, so you're in our prayers. And she's like, well, actually, we're secular. And then they immediately changed what they were saying. And they're like, oh, well, we would never push our beliefs on anybody. No, you're in our thoughts. And they said, there's, it doesn't matter, who you are. We still appreciate that you're out here and that you're helping everybody. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get a little teary-eyed. Like, we did get teary-eyed because they were just exactly everything that we would hope somebody would be. They were at the moment. They were just like appreciative that we were there. And so they said, well, we give, these quilts to the homeowners, but we also give out these little quilted squares to every volunteer. And if, we would love to give you guys a square just as a show of our appreciation for you donating your time to help people who are the most vulnerable and the most in need. And we were like, heck yes, we will take a square. And so we ended up taking a picture where we're all holding our squares. And it was really that bridge the gap moment. And we have that in our trainings, that there's this opportunity to identify yourself, but not get in a debate, and have them recognize your like humanity and that you're both there for the exact same thing, and it's to help people.